Hello and welcome to the CSI Secrets Call, sponsored by the CNCF. Today is March 17th, 2022. And just to let everyone know, this call is under the guidance of CNCF and the Code of Conduct is in use. If you're not familiar with the Code of Conduct, please visit the repo and view the Code of Conduct markdown file. All right. So welcome everyone. Not much is happening. We did release v.1.1.1 almost a couple of weeks ago, I believe 10 days ago. So that's the latest release there on the driver, and I believe the provider side too. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not much of an agenda today. So I think what we'll do is I'll open it up if there's any comments or anything that anyone wants to discuss. If not, we can actually just go through the issues list and see if there's any issues out there that we need to talk about or highlight to the community. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think a quick update is, so we merged, I think a bug fix PR for Helm charts, and then also CVE fix. Yeah, so the third PR, 898.
Okay.
Yeah. So we merged that, and I have a PR open to cherry pick it to the release branch. And then we also merged a PR to fix CVE in the base image. So we were actually thinking if there's nothing else, then we can cut 1.1.2 next week. So that we have a patched version available.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Let's see, and then what we have up top to be merged. Okay, this is that cherry pick that you were referencing there, and it's right. Yeah,
right.
This is it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then the first PR is also ready for review. So it's like a new contributor. I'd opened an issue about adding all the command flags that we have for the driver today. Like the only way that a user would know is they have to go look at our main.go. So basically, we're adding this to our documentation. So yeah, whenever anyone gets a chance, I think the lake is already reviewed, so we can all take a look and then comment on it.
Okay. Any other discussions before we jump into the issues list? All right. Nish, you mentioned there was one particular issue that you wanted to chat about.
Yeah, Nilek also mentioned the other one that I created, right? So the first two issues, I think, are the ones that we should discuss. The first one is specific to the driver. The second one is just general Kubernetes enhancement, I guess. But yeah, we can go through it in the same order. Yeah.
Okay. So consistently update patch community secrets as part of the reconciler. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to summarize what the problem is. So the thing is, let's say a user creates a deployment with one replica today, and then they reference the CSI driver, and then they also sync as Kubernetes secret. So when that deployment gets created, we do everything. So the pod gets created, provider gets called, provider calls external secret store, returns the secret. And then at that point in our node publish volume, we mount it and say everything is good. And then we create the secret provider class pod status. Then we have a reconciler which watches on the secret provider class pod status. It says, okay, this is created. Now let me go check if the user also wants to sync as Kubernetes secret. And then if the secret does not exist, it will go create it. But it doesn't update it because we don't want to do any kind of inconsistency across the data. The only controller that updates an existing Kubernetes secret today is the rotation reconciler. So this is without rotation in picture, right? So they set up everything works, right? Now let's say they go and update, and then also when this Kubernetes secret gets created, we add the replica set as the owner for the Kubernetes secret because we try to tie the lifetime, right? Now, let's say they go and do a rolling update of this deployment. Like they've made changes to their application, they're doing a rolling update. So when they do a rolling update, a new replica set gets created. The new pod comes up, and then the old pod goes away. So the new replica set comes in and the old replica set goes away. During this time, what happens is when the new replica set gets created, the mount succeeds. Our secret sync controller triggers and says, let me go check if the secret exists. It checks, and then the secret actually exists because the old owner is not yet gone. Because usually it's like new pod comes and then the old pod goes away, right? So this one says the old owner exists, and then the old secret exists and it skips creating the secret. But then after the check is done, the secret actually goes away because the old owner gets deleted. And then the pod, when it's trying to start up, it says, hey, look, I need this secret, but I don't find it. So I'm just going to be stuck in container creating state until the secret gets created. Our reconciler checks every 5 minutes to check if the current state of the world matches the desired state. So after 5 minutes, it eventually goes and creates the secret. It sees it missing and creates it, but there is that time delay of 5 minutes that the user can incur. And this is a very subtle race condition that cannot happen all the time. Like this is very intermittent. Like if your cluster has really high load, then that is when garbage collection takes a long time. So that is when this can happen. And then the only way they can mitigate it now for a deterministic behavior is before they do a rolling update, they delete the existing secret so that when the new pod comes in, the secret will not exist and it will be created. And then the second option is if they see the pod in a failed state, they go and delete the pod. That will trigger the whole flow for the mount and sync and everything. And that works. So I created an issue. I tried to repro this. I was not able to, but I did find one user who hit the issue. I think if we try it a couple of times, we might be able to repro, like at least 1 out of 10 or 20 times. But I just opened this to see, is there something that we can do in the driver? Like one obvious thing is maybe we can just reduce the reconcile time to like 1 minute. It's all looking up the cache. It's not actually making calls to API server, so it might not increase the number of API calls. Like that's one thing. But I was just thinking if there's any other opinion on this, on what we can do.
So is the new pod in a crash loop until the
so the new pod, the pods reference this Kubernetes secret as environment variables. So when the secret doesn't exist, it just doesn't start running at all. Because the controller runtime says, hey, I didn't find the secret.
Yeah.
And then it'll just get stuck. And then the weird thing is when it gets stuck in that state, there is no retry. So the pod gets stuck like that forever until like manually deleted.
Wow. Okay.
So even if you create the secret, they don't see it. So they have to go and restart it sometimes.
Wait, can you say that last part? Because I thought you said that after sufficient time, it does heal itself, but you're saying it. Did I?
Yeah, so after 5 minutes, we go and create the secret because we see it missing, right? Like we have that 5 minutes reconcile loop. After that, sometimes the user has to go delete it. Like at least that's what I've heard, but I haven't been able to repro it yet. But if we reduce that 5 minutes to a lesser time, it'll just create it sooner.
My other question was like, deployment has one behavior, but like replica sets can't. Kubernetes allows you to change how new things are deployed, right? Like, you know, like you can say like delete everything and then start it up, right? Like it's not always a rolling. Is that true? Like we can't just assume that like the new pod will be created before an old pod is deleted.
Right. So if we don't assume that, that's actually good, right? Like if if a new pod gets created only after old is deleted, then that is a very deterministic behavior. Like in that case, the secret will go away and then the new pod comes in, it won't find the secret we created. But I think only in case of deployment, not even daemon set, I think only deployment, the replica set, they have this revision history, right? So if you roll out a new version of the deployment, it just creates a new replica set. And then once the replica set conditions are met, it will go and delete the old replica set. And the old replica set doesn't necessarily get deleted. Even there, you have a configuration option on how many revisions to keep. So if you actually say keep 100 revisions, the old replica sets will never get deleted. So I think this happens only when like you have one replica and then also you set your revision history to almost 0 because you don't want to keep any of that and you hit this issue.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think whether or not there is anything that we can like behavior we can rely on or encode, but I think that Kubernetes gives just enough flexibility to where there isn't like an invariant for us to rely on to. Yeah. Okay.
So you're saying that if you set your deployment to not have any revision history, there's no issue, right? Because it doesn't have any previous deployment to look at.
So if you do a completely new deployment, like what Tommy said, right? Like you delete and create a new one, you're good because it's a brand new deployment.
Right.
Or if you have a revision history, actually you're safer because Kubernetes won't delete the older replica sets.
Got it.
So your like secret will exist. But if you set it to 0, then basically there's that race where Kubernetes is deleting it, we are checking it, and then we see it, but it deletes it after we see it.
One thing I was thinking is the owner reference is an array, right? So can we add like a multiple replica set as an owner? Because we exactly know, right, which replica is going to create the secret. So maybe potentially on the secret, we can have like two owners, like two replica sets. And then whenever the other one will get deleted, our patcher will go ahead and remove one owner.
So that's what we do, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, essentially I was trying to say the same thing. So by doing that, probably if there are like two owners and either of that resources present, we can skip deleting.
Right. So that's what we do, right? The thing is, before we used to do that as just part of the controller loop. So when we used to say like, hey, I see a pod status, let me go check if the secret exists. If the secret exists, we would just go and try to patch the owner for it immediately. The problem with that is if you have multiple replicas of that deployment, every secret store CSI driver pod is going to try and patch that single Kubernetes secret. So to avoid conflicts, we moved the whole patcher logic out of that controller into its own reconcile loop, which runs every 5 seconds. So this scenario happens. This is a very weird race condition, which happens where none of this things take place. Like it's like this, the controller checks the secret exists, and then it's going to skip it, and then the secret gets deleted right before the patcher runs to add the owner reference.
Right. Other thing I'm not thinking on top of my head right now is so patcher today runs like a periodically where it will alter the resources or delete the secret and whatnot, or a reconciler actually. Can we rely on Kubernetes event for that, for deleting?
When you say deleting, so you're saying instead of owner reference, we delete the secret?
Yes, I mean, not exactly, but so what I was trying to think is, right, yeah, I'm not sure that it will solve the problem or not. So like if we get a delete event of a particular replica set, then only go ahead and delete it. So that can potentially avoid that weird timing situation probably. So today we read, I mean, we try to see what different secrets or replica sets we have to go ahead and look for in order to delete the secret. And within that processing time, either it might already have deleted or created a new replica set or something like that.
So we don't
That
do
makes
any
sense.
deletion today at all. So like we only add the owner, and then when the owner gets deleted, it gets garbage collected by Kubernetes itself.
Right.
So we move that overhead from the driver and just say like, we will patch it with what we think is the owner. You take care of the life cycle of it.
Mm.
Like we could eventually do the deletion as well. It's just like an additional overhead on the driver to like monitor owners getting deleted. And then we also cannot use owner reference there, because if you add owner reference, Kubernetes will garbage collected. So we have to like maintain that state somewhere else. And then when all the owners get deleted, we have to go delete it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one way I can see is we tune up the timings so that the user doesn't have to wait a long time. Also, this is not a very common issue, right? Like this is probably the first one that we have gotten. So I was thinking we can get ahead of it and see if there's a better way we can solve this in the upcoming release, like maybe for 1.2.
I mean, reducing the our reconciler time, that seems like undeterministic way of doing it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we can still probably think what else we can do.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can think about it, and then if you have any thoughts, like add to the issue, and then we can see how to go forward with it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe we'll ping this issue out on Slack and just ask for some comments and come back to this in a couple of weeks and see if we have a plan of action.
Yeah.
All right. So that was
And then the second
9.9.
one.
And then we have the pods using CSI volumes fail to terminate if CSI driver pods have been evicted.
Yeah, so this one I don't think is actually a driver issue per se, but I think this is just a general Kubernetes issue, right? So two scenarios. The thing is, your CSI driver pods need to be running on your node if you want your pod volume to succeed. And then similarly, you need a CSI driver pods to be running on the node if you want your pod volume unmount to succeed. So in both the scenarios, you need the CSI driver pod to be running so that your pod can get created with a new volume, and then your pod can also get deleted if it is using a volume, right? And then the problem arises when there is a scale up event or a scale down event. So let's say you have a cluster and then you have CSI driver deployed and running, as Damon said. Now cluster autoscaler scales up your cluster and adds a node to your cluster. When the new node gets created, there is no way to guarantee that your CSI driver is the first pod that's running on the node. So when your new node comes up, if your application starts running before the driver pod is running, then the volume mount will fail because kubelet will try to talk to the CSI driver, and then it will say, hey, I don't find any driver running here, and it'll just fail the volume mount. Kubelet has internal retries to succeed, but the thing is, kubelet also exponentially backs off after the first few set of errors. So if the driver is still not running after 2 minutes, then kubelet will back off and then retry after a certain time. So essentially, your pod might be stuck in container creating state because it's not able to mount the volume for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes. That is one problem, right? This particular problem, there was actually a KEP in Kubernetes called Node Readiness Gate. So this is for CSI driver and then other system critical add-on pods. how do we ensure that those pods are the first one that's running on a new node before your workload is actually running? And then the second problem is when your node is actually getting deleted. When your node is actually getting deleted, there is no way to tell the scheduler what order to evict the pods in, right? So in the worst case scenario, if your CSI driver pod is the first one that gets evicted when the node is deleting, now all the pods that used the CSI driver to mount the volume are stuck in unmounting forever. So unless your volume can unmount, Kubernetes will not be able to delete that pod. And now those pods are always stuck in deleting, terminating state. And when those pods are stuck, your node is also stuck in deleting state. So like the only way is as a user, you go and manually do a kubectl delete, force delete with grace period of 0. So you force delete the pods and then your node gets cleaned up. So both the problems are with scheduling. And I think they open the issue here to say, maybe we can do systemd similar to CNI drivers. So basically install it on the node as a host process, and then it keeps running with systemd. I don't think that's a good long-term solution. So I added that as a comment because CSI drivers can be deployed and deleted. It's not necessarily running all the time. Like it's totally up to the user when they want to install it and remove it. Like that's the convenience. And then also we rely on all these sidecars, right? Like CNI doesn't have all the sidecars. So if we have to go and do systemd and all that, we have to re-architect the whole thing. And then also come up with a way to do this on Windows, because again, Windows doesn't allow you to just throw anything on the host. The only way would be to you have to use the new host privileged process that landed in latest Kubernetes 123. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. So I think this is a good enhancement for Kubernetes in general. Like I did post it on SIG scheduling and ask, but I didn't get any response. But I think this is something that we can help drive in the community. Like if all folks think this is a Kubernetes problem, but yeah, I just wanted to throw it up on the floor here.
And you're talking about driving the KEP, right? Around the node readiness gate, is that right?
Yeah, that KEP was for any pod. So any pod you think is critical to be running before your workload starts running, you can basically say, hey, this is a critical pod. So all those critical pods need to be running before your workload can actually get scheduled.
But does it, well, okay, so I get on creation of the node, but then does it like reverse the order on deletion? Okay, so
no, that one was only handling creation. And then even for creation, there's actually like a way we can, there are multiple ways we can accomplish this. Like a lot of people have just developed their own solution for it, but there's nothing for deletion so far. But I think Tommy had something. I can go through the solution after.
Yeah, I was going to say it'd be helpful to get the KEP link on the issue there. And then the other thought I had is it seems like deletion is the more interesting one than creation to me, at least, because like presumably if you just wait long enough on creation, it would get around to working. But for deletion, like we could, like if there isn't an actual Kubernetes-based solution, we could just set a very high termination grace period, trap the SIG term signal, and keep our pod running for, you know, like another 60 seconds normally before propagating the actual shutdown of our service. So that we would just like choose a value high enough towards the other nodes are likely to have a termination grace period below, you know, what we choose, or make that configurable kind of on the driver. Just so that, yeah, we keep it running for longer. Although I guess I don't know if maybe like if the kubelet just decides to work on one pod at a time before moving to the next, then that might not work. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is no way to block it until all the pods using it are deleted. Like I was thinking we can even check the pod status. Like that is one thing we can rely on in the driver because we create it for every single pod, right? And then we can just be stuck until all those pod statuses are gone. Like we can just say, I won't terminate until all of these are gone from this thing. But the problem is, let's say they just want to uninstall, like not even that. If let's say they are just upgrading to a newer version, then it can take a long time for that upgrade to happen, right? Because with the approach that I'm saying, the pod will actually never upgrade, it'll just be stuck because the old one, when it's getting deleted, will say, hey, no, as these pod status, I will not die. And then the new one will never be able to come up. But also if we increase the termination time, then during upgrades, it can take like 60 or 1 minute, 60 seconds or 1 minute before the new pod starts running. Yeah, this was the link to the KEP. So this was node readiness gate, but this was specifically for the create scenario. And you're right, the creation actually is not a big problem. Like I think it's just a better user experience because it does eventually resolve today. But on the delete path, yes, there is no resolution. It just needs someone to manually go and delete it. And even when they manually delete it, it's still not the clean way to do it.
So you think our efforts are to just enhance the KEP to handle this? I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so actually for this KEP eventually got closed, I think. But like some of the solutions that people are using for the create path today is when you deploy a cluster, you can actually bootstrap it with certain set of taints, like custom taints to say like add on critical equal to false or something like that. And then you can make all your add-on pods tolerate that taint. So when a new node comes up in a scale-up event, your critical add-ons will get deployed because they are tolerating that taint. And then they built this custom controller called a taint controller, which will periodically check if all the pod labels that it's configured with have been created on the new node. And if it's a preset, right? And if all the pods that match the labels is done, so like let's say they'll say secrets for CSI driver, GCP CSI driver, Azure CSI driver, and then what that controller does is it'll periodically check if one of each pod is running on that node. If it confirms that those 3 pods are running, it will go and untaint that node to remove that taint which was added during bootstrap. And then basically all the workload which was not tolerating the taint before will go land on it now. So that handles the create path. I think that there are a couple of custom implementations for it today. There is one from Wish called Node Taint Controller. But I think for the delete, there is no way to do it. Like we can see if the community has anything for it, or if their recommendation is that each driver has to handle this on their own. Because I think for us, it's still pretty simple, right? All we really do is just unmount, so we clean up the secrets and everything. But in case of like other actual CSI drivers which mount and unmount disks, you'll just get stuck in a bad state where you haven't unmounted the disk from the node; it's just stuck there. So yes, I mean, I think it's something we should work with the community to solve rather than each driver figuring out a way on how to do this. And today it's CSI driver, but it can also be something else, which becomes a critical add-on later. Like in the Azure scenario, I can think of like when we had pod identity, it was similar, right? Like how do we control the order in which it schedules when you're adding IP table rules and stuff like that?
Got it. Okay. And in every scenario, there's like cluster autoscale configured, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like dynamically nodes coming in and going away. So Yeah, it's a very interesting problem. Like, if SIG scheduling is interested, it'll be great. Like, on how we can do it, but yeah, so far I don't think there's any.
Tracking that. Okay. Is there any other issue we want to chat about?
No, for 878, I think they signed the CLA, but they have issues. So I'm going to point them to the CLA support team. But they have a PR open in test infra with their GCP secrets manager instance. And then I think Tommy also looked at it. It mostly looks good. So if they get through the CLA stuff, we can help merge that one PR and then like help them with the second set of PR to add like jobs to test it out.
Okay. This is scheduled to hit 1.2. The path move here. Good.
Yeah, and then I think there are a couple of documentation stuff too. So maybe we can add those to 1.2 too. Like I think that it's been open for a while, so we can get that done in this release. Like it's not a blocker, but I was just thinking we can plan it for this milestone. So we have assignees for each of it and just add all the stuff to the doc.
Yeah, some of these are pretty old time stamps on
Yeah.
some of these docs. Okay. All right. Cool. I don't know if there's anything on the second page worth chatting about. Getting into some really stale stuff.
Yeah, nothing major. Like one last thing that I was thinking about was, is there a way we can do something around encryption for the files that we add to the file system? So like today, whatever we write is in plain text.
There's an issue that has in one of the main Kubernetes repos about Kubernetes secrets and options for that. I think there are a few different things we can do there. I think one of the weirdest parts though is that like if your application can handle decryption of secrets, like it could also just talk to one of the secret APIs. Yeah, it might be easier to experiment with that in this driver than in Kubernetes secrets, just because there can be more opting in and changing in the driver than just Kubernetes itself. I'll try to look up that. Yeah, it's just a Kubernetes issue I've been following for like 3 years now.
Okay.
That has that. I'll try to look it up and add it to the notes here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. So you're saying there's going to be like a key provided, some sort? In reference to
just
encrypt and decrypt?
The issue is about just securing the files on the file system.
Wow, gotcha.
And there's a few suggestions and of like putting keys and additional metadata or using, I think the kernel has a key service to, I'll look it up and link it, but I know it is a concern outside of just this driver, like it's a general Kubernetes concern. But,
Yeah, there's actually like some recommendations on that issue and what can be done, then maybe we can just go ping and see like, hey, is this going to happen? And then we can follow the same process for other stuff too.
Yeah, I think the
With
general
that,
thing is that
yeah.
it's unlikely to happen, but like it's been open for a while and hasn't been picked up. But it is.
So
Did you
with that,
try?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
No, I was just gonna say, so with that thought, if someone had the right level of permissions ejecting into the pod and seeing the clear text secret that's mounted, is that what that would fix, or?
I think it would mainly protect against things like a vulnerability that allows you to get like file read permissions, but not necessarily execution permissions. So
Got it.
like, yeah, for like path traversal vulnerabilities and things like that, adding a second layer where like there is a key out of band of the file system would help it so that those vulnerabilities do not lead to escalation of privileges. Yeah, I'll try to take it. I'll look that up and add it to the notes here.
I think we're good on that. As far as 1.2, when do we think that's going to hit? Did we discuss that?
We have not set a date yet, but
Okay.
I think like the required republish, I already have most of the changes, so I can get that going. I think once this and the other PR lands, I think we can actually start planning for the release. Like apart from that, I think most of the other things that we want to do are doc updates and stuff like that. So
2 in here. Okay. Right. So yeah, some good interesting topics here. Is there any other questions or comments? See, Tom's joined. Hey, Tom. And we got Ray.
Hey, yeah, nothing for me, thanks.
All right. Ray, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with you. Do you want to introduce yourself to the community?
Sure. My name is Ramy Abraham. I just short by Ray. I'm fairly new to the Kubernetes platform or industry, and kind of picked up the group as I guess this group that participates frequently, and I'm always desire or hunger to learn, so I always make it a point to listen in when possible. So nothing to introduce, but just listen in to expand my knowledge. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to have you. Thanks for joining. All right. Well, if that is it, a couple of topics that we'll put out on the Slack channels and see if we can get some feedback on and possibly have some direction here next call. With that, our next call will be Thursday, March 31st in a couple of weeks. I'll go ahead and have this recording out soon, hopefully by the end of the day. And with that, we'll go ahead and end the call for this week, unless anyone has any other comments or questions or anything else they want to discuss. Okay, cool. I think we're good. Okay. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, March 31st. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.